She woke up earlier than usual that morning, long before the sun made its way over the rooftops outside her window. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the old refrigerator and the faint breathing of her young nephew sleeping in the next room. She always tried to enjoy these few moments of calm before the day began, even though her schedule never really allowed much rest. But she had learned that a little silence could keep a long day from feeling heavier than it already was. She made herself a cup of tea, the cheapest brand she could find at the corner shop, and opened the small window above the sink. A cool breeze drifted in, carrying the scent of wet soil from the neighbor's garden. For a moment, she just stood there, letting the air brush across her face. She tried to soak in the peace while she could. The day would be busy. Her job at the local grocery store had turned into full shifts almost every day. Even though it rarely paid enough, she was grateful to have something steady. She had taken in her nephew months earlier when things became difficult for his parents, and ever since then, her life had been a series of long days, tight budgets, and trying not to let worry wear her down. She never complained. She just kept moving, after waking the boy, making him a quick breakfast, and guiding him through the usual morning rush. She dropped him off at school and began her commute to work. The sky was brighter by then, and people were already out walking dogs, rushing to offices, or grabbing early morning coffee. She watched them as she drove, wondering sometimes how many of them were dealing with struggles she couldn't see. Her car, an old sedan that rattled whenever she turned the wheel too fast, needed gas. She had known that since last night, but didn't have the energy to stop. Now she sighed, hoping she had enough to reach the gas station that sold the cheapest fuel in town. She arrived there a few minutes later. The place was quiet, with only 3 other cars parked near the pumps. She pulled into an empty spot and reached for her wallet. Her fingers paused for a second when she noticed how thin it had become. She counted the money inside just enough to get a little gas and still buy groceries later. She reminded herself not to panic. She always found a way as she stepped out of her car. She saw him. A large motorcycle stood near the far pump black, heavy, gleaming under the morning sun. Beside it stood a man, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a worn leather jacket covered in patches. The most noticeable was the one that caught everyone's eye, the Hells Angels emblem across his back. His boots were dusty, and his helmet sat on the seat of the bike. He looked tired, the kind of tired that came from long roads and long nights. She noticed him because people were staring at him the same way they usually stared at anyone who didn't fit their picture of safe. Woman filling her tank kept glancing at him with suspicion, clutching her keys a little too tightly. Another man pretended not to look, but his eyes gave him away. It wasn't uncommon in their small town. People judged quickly and rarely gave second chances. She didn't stare. She didn't feel scared. She simply noticed. The man stood by the pump with his card in his hand, sliding it again and again into the reader. She saw the screen flash red. Card declined. He tried another card. Same result. His shoulders sank a little, and he let out a frustrated breath. He took out his phone, stared at it, then put it back, as if debating what to do next. It was clear he wasn't trying to cause trouble. He just looked stuck. People watched, but no one moved. The woman saw this and felt something tug at her chest. She knew what it was like to be standing in public, trying to solve a problem while strangers formed their own stories in their heads. She knew what it felt like when a little help would make all the difference, but no. One stepped forward. She didn't overthink it. She walked toward him slowly so he didn't feel startled. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "Is everything all right?" He looked up, surprised that someone had actually approached him. His voice was deeper than she expected, but gentle, not rough like people might assume. "Card's not working. I think the bank put a hold on it." Didn't expect that. "I'm trying to get to the next town." She glanced at the empty tank meter on his bike. He clearly wasn't going anywhere without fuel. She also saw the embarrassment in his expression, the kind that came from having people judge you even when you weren't doing anything wrong. "How much do you need?" she asked. He shook his head quickly. No, I didn't ask for anything. I'll figure it out. I just need a minute." She understood pride. She understood the desire to stand on your own 2 feet. But she also understood that sometimes people needed kindness more than they needed independence. "It's okay," she said gently. "Let me help. Just a little gas so you can get where you're going. You don't owe me anything." He looked at her again, really looked at her, as if trying to understand why she would help him when so many others were avoiding him. He hesitated. "You sure?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Yeah, it's all right." He stepped aside slowly, giving her space near the pump. She swiped her card, selecting just enough fuel to be helpful, but not enough to strain her wallet too much. The pump clicked on, filling the tank. The biker stood there silently, watching with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice softer than before. "People don't usually do this for me." She gave a small smile. "People don't usually know what others are going through." For a moment, neither of them said anything. There was a strange calm between them, like the world around them had paused. He seemed to be searching for the right words but couldn't find them. When the pump clicked off, he nodded respectfully. "I won't forget this," he said. "Really?" She waved it off lightly. "Just get to where you need to go safely." He put on his helmet, secured his jacket, and got on his bike. The engine roared to life, loud but steady. Before he rode away, he looked at her once more, his expression thoughtful, was almost warm beneath his tough appearance. Then he pulled off the lot and disappeared down the road. She stood there for a moment, watching the bike shrink into the distance. She didn't feel heroic or special. She just felt human. She went back to her car, filled her own tank with what little she could afford, and headed to work. The day would be long, and she still had responsibilities waiting for her when she returned home. Helping the biker wasn't something she expected to think about again. It was just a small moment, she thought. One of those things you do without expecting anything in return. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined, was that her quiet act of kindness would travel far beyond that gas station. It would reach people she had never met. It would echo in places she never planned to step into. And it would bring something to her doorstep the next day that she wasn't prepared for. For now. Though she drove through the familiar streets of her town, unaware that her life had already begun to shift. By the time she reached the grocery store, her mind was already on the tasks ahead. She clocked in, greeted her coworkers, and went straight to organizing the morning stock. Throughout the day, she didn't think much about the biker, except for one small moment when she wondered whether he reached his destination safely. She hoped he did. The rest of her workday passed like any other. She bagged groceries, helped customers find items on shelves, answered simple questions, and smiled even when she was tired. Some customers were kind, others impatient, but she treated everyone the same. She believed kindness wasn't something to give only when it was easy. She believed it mattered most when life was exhausting. When her shift ended, she picked up her nephew from school, took him home, helped him with homework, cooked dinner, and tucked him into bed. The routine was tiring, but it was hers. She felt responsible for keeping him safe, fed, and loved. She wanted him to grow up knowing that even when the world felt heavy, there were still good people out there later that night. After cleaning the kitchen and folding laundry, she finally sat on the couch. Her back ached slightly and her feet throbbed, but she didn't complain. She never did. She simply breathed deeply and allowed herself a moment to rest. She thought again about the biker, the way he looked lost for a moment, the way he looked surprised that she helped him. She didn't regret spending the money, even though it meant she would have to be careful with her budget for the rest of the week. To her, kindness was something you gave because you could, not because you expected anything back. She didn't know that the biker had already reached his destination. She didn't know he had talked about her the moment he arrived. She didn't know that her simple act had touched him in a way she couldn't imagine. She didn't know that her tomorrow would not look like her today, as she turned off the lights and walked toward her bedroom. She assumed the next day would be like all the others, quiet, ordinary, predictable. She had no idea that in less than 12 hours, the sound of dozens of engines would shake the air. Outside her home, she had no idea that people she had never met would show up on her lawn. She had no idea her story had already traveled farther than she ever had. For now, she slept, unaware of what was coming, unaware that her small act of kindness was about to ripple into something much bigger, unaware that her life, so simple and routine, was already shifting in ways she couldn't see, and all of it began with a quiet morning, a gas station, and a moment of compassion that most people overlook but she chose not to. The biker rode through the long stretch of road with the wind hitting his jacket in the morning, the sun slowly warming the sky. As miles passed, he kept replaying the moment at the gas station. He had been on the road for hours, tired and frustrated, and the last thing he expected was for someone, a stranger, to help him without hesitation. People usually saw the patches on his jacket and stepped back, sometimes even pulled their kids closer. He was used to that. But the woman at the gas station hadn't looked at him with fear or judgment. She had looked at him like he was simply another human being who needed a little help. He thought about the way she spoke, how steady and warm her voice was. She didn't ask questions or look uncomfortable. She didn't act like she was doing something brave by being near him. She just saw someone struggling and stepped forward. He wasn't sure why that stuck with him so deeply, but it did. As he reached the edge of the next town, the road opened into wider land. The buildings were smaller at first, then became taller as he reached the center. He pulled up to a familiar warehouse-style building, an old structure with a huge rolling door, a metal roof, and a faded sign that marked it as the place where he and his group met. Several motorcycles were lined outside, their chrome catching the light. He could already hear laughter and loud voices from inside. When he stepped off his bike and walked through the door, several heads turned. Men wearing similar jackets looked at him with curiosity. "You look like you've had a morning," one of them said. He nodded, but didn't explain right away. He took off his helmet, wiped his forehead, and set the helmet on a nearby shelf. For a moment, he wasn't sure how to start. They all knew him as someone who didn't talk much about his feelings. He was loyal, fierce when needed, and quiet most of the time. But what happened at the gas station kept pulling at him. One of the older members walked over. "Everything good?" He took a slow breath and finally spoke. "You're not going to believe what happened on the road." They gathered around him, not in a rushed way, but with the interest that comes from tight brotherhood. They were used to stories of long trips, run-ins with rude drivers, mechanical problems, or strange encounters. But this wasn't that. He told them everything. Not with dramatic flair, not exaggerating, just plainly. He told them about the card decline, the awkward moment of people staring, and the woman who stepped forward without being afraid of him. He described how calm she was, how natural her kindness felt, and how she didn't treat him like a threat or an outsider. She treated him like a man who needed help. When he finished, the room was quiet. Not because the story was shocking, but because of the sincerity behind it. One of the younger members leaned back against the pool table and said, "People never help us. They act like we're trouble even when we're minding our own business." Another nodded. "That's rare. Real rare." The older member scratched his beard thoughtfully. "A lot of folks forget we're just people too. Patches or not." The biker who had been helped crossed his arms and looked at the ground for a second. She didn't flinch. She just helped. "Didn't want anything back?" someone asked. "Did you at least get her name?" He shook his head. "No, she wasn't trying to make it a big thing. She didn't want anything from me." That made the others exchange looks. A group like theirs valued loyalty and gratitude. They remembered every kindness shown to them, because it didn't happen often. Then one of the men said, "We should do something." There was no hesitation in his voice. Another nodded in agreement. "Yeah, people treat us like we're dangerous monsters, but someone finally saw past it. We don't let something like that go." The biker who had been helped lifted his eyes. He knew what they meant, but he didn't want to scare her. "We can't just overwhelm her. She seemed quiet, kind. We don't want to make her uncomfortable." The older member stepped closer and put a hand on his shoulder. "We won't go to scare her. We'll go to thank her. Show her respect. Real respect. The kind she showed you." A few voices echoed in approval. Some suggested bringing small things, food, supplies, simple gestures of appreciation. Nothing too much, just a way to let her know that what she did mattered. Their group was known for many things, but one thing stood above everything else: loyalty. They always looked out for people who looked out for them, While they talked, the biker kept remembering her expression, calm, warm, steady. He didn't know her life, her struggles, or whether she helped people often, but something told him that her kindness came from a place deeper than just good manners. Maybe she had been through hard things. Maybe she knew how it felt to be judged before anyone knew her story. The older member said, "We should show up tomorrow morning. Not early enough to scare her, not late enough to bother her. Just respectful." The group agreed instantly. There were no objections, no second guesses. These were men who lived by their own code. Gratitude was a part of that code. Meanwhile, the woman at home had no idea she had become the topic of a long discussion miles away. She was finishing up dinner dishes, humming softly under her breath. Her nephew sat at the kitchen table working on a school project. She asked him questions every few minutes, helping him cut shapes out of colored paper. It was a simple evening, the kind she wished she had more of. When she tucked him into bed, he asked her if she could stay until he fell asleep. She smiled and sat beside him, brushing his hair back from his forehead. He closed his eyes, comforted by her presence. When he finally drifted off, she turned off the small lamp beside his bed and slipped quietly into the hallway. She had no idea that, miles away, a group of men she had never met were planning to repay her kindness. Later that night, the biker and his group began preparing. They cleaned their bikes, made sure their engines were running smoothly, and talked about how to approach her in a calm, respectful way. Some of them gathered small items, grocery bags, a few gift cards, household supplies, things that could be helpful, but not overwhelming. They debated for a while about whether it would seem like too much, but eventually decided that gratitude should never feel threatening. They would keep everything simple. Around the same time, the woman sat on her couch, finally resting after a long day. She thought about the biker only once more. She wondered where he was, if he had made it to his destination, or if he was still out on the road. She had no idea she had made such an impression. To her, kindness was just a part of who she was. She didn't see it as extraordinary. Sometime after midnight, the biker finally lay down in his own bed at the club's rest area. But he didn't fall asleep right away. His thoughts kept drifting back to the gas station, to the soft way she spoke. And the way she didn't treat him like less or more, it's just human. He didn't realize how long he'd been replaying the moment until he finally drifted into sleep. By early morning, the sun was just beginning to rise when the men gathered outside. One by one, engines came to life, deep, heavy, and steady. The noise bounced off the brick walls of the warehouse, creating a rumbling sound that would turn heads anywhere. But their goal wasn't to intimidate. Their goal was to show respect. "Let's ride," the older member said. And with that, the group pulled out onto the road in a long, organized line. The biker who had been helped led the way, carrying with him the same sense of calm he had felt when she stepped forward the day before. Meanwhile, the woman at home woke up to her usual routine. She didn't feel anything unusual in the air. She made breakfast, packed a small snack for her nephew's school day, and brushed crumbs off the kitchen counter. She tied her hair back with a simple band and glanced at the clock. It was early, but not too early. She didn't feel rushed, just steady. She opened the front door to check the weather. The air felt crisp, and the morning breeze carried the scent of dew from the nearby trees. She stood there for a moment, breathing it in. She didn't hear anything yet. Not the engines, not the rumbling, not the sound of dozens of motorcycles heading in her direction, but she would, in less than an hour. The quiet street where she lived would shake with the sound of engines. Neighbors would peek through windows, curtains would move, dogs would bark, people would whisper, and she would step outside with confusion in her eyes, unaware that the moment she thought she had forgotten had grown into something much bigger, a chain of gratitude she'd never expected, carried on wheels by people she'd never imagined would show up at her home. Her life, still steady and ordinary in this moment, was already on the edge of something new. The street was still quiet when the woman finished. Helping her nephew with his backpack and lunchbox, he stood near the door, tying his shoes while humming the tune he heard in class the day before. She watched him for a moment, gently reminding him to pull the laces tighter. Her morning had been like any other slow movements, a warm breakfast. In a simple routine that gave her comfort even on difficult days, she opened the door to walk him to the bus stop, expecting nothing more than the usual slow start of the neighborhood. But the moment she stepped onto the porch, she felt something different in the air. It wasn't the wind or the temperature. It was something she couldn't name, a kind of deep vibration under her feet that made her pause. Her nephew looked up at her. "What's that sound?" She listened again. A faint rumble far away, but growing. It didn't sound like cars. It didn't sound like thunder. It was deeper, steadier, like someone beating a drum from miles away. Before she could answer, the sound grew louder. Much louder. She stepped onto the lawn, squinting down the long street. At first, she saw nothing. But then, slowly, shapes began to appear. Dark shapes. Moving steadily side by side, her eyebrows pulled together. "Is that?" Her heart skipped. Motorcycles. Not one, not two, more than she could count. Dozens. Her nephew gasped and grabbed her arm. "They're coming this way." She didn't move. She couldn't. She stood still, frozen between confusion and disbelief. The engines grew louder, loud enough that neighbors opened their doors. Curtains shifted. A few people stepped onto porches, whispering to one another. Some looked nervous. Some looked curious. All were confused. The long line of motorcycles turned onto her street in perfect formation, like they had planned this ride carefully. The bikes glimmered under the morning sun, chrome shining. Engines rumbling like rolling thunder, her breath caught in her throat. She counted as many as she could. 10, 15, 20, maybe more. They moved slowly, respectfully, not rushing or revving their engines aggressively. The lead bike came to a stop directly in front of her house. Then she saw him. The biker from the gas station. He removed his helmet, revealing the same calm eyes she remembered from the day before. He didn't look intimidating now, he looked grateful. Behind him, the other bikers cut their engines one by one, filling the street with sudden silence after the deep rumbling faded. Her nephew grabbed her hand tightly. She squeezed his in return, but her eyes stayed on the biker. He approached her porch slowly, giving her space, his boots crunching softly on the gravel of her walkway. The other bikers stayed near their motorcycles, not crowding her yard, not making sudden movements. Their posture was calm, almost gentle. She swallowed. "Is everything okay?" The biker nodded. "Everything's fine. We just came to see you." Her neighbor across the street almost choked on her coffee. Another neighbor pulled out a phone as if ready to record. But one look from one of the bikers made him think better of it. The woman stepped off the porch, not scared, just confused. "I don't understand." The biker stopped a few feet from her, showing respect, not wanting to scare her. He looked at her with the same honest expression he had at the gas station. "You helped me yesterday," he said. "You didn't know me. You didn't judge me. You didn't turn away. And you didn't treat me like people usually do." She blinked slowly. "It wasn't a big thing." His eyes softened. "To me it was—" He stepped aside, motioning with his hand. And that was when she noticed the bags on the bikes. Grocery bags, boxes, small gift items. Things she didn't expect, things that made her throat tighten. "We wanted to thank you," he said. "All of us." She stared, still processing this. "This is too much." "It's not," he replied gently. "To you, what you did was small. But to us, kindness like that is rare. A lot of people don't give us a second look. You gave me a chance." She felt her chest warm with emotion. She looked at the men gathered on her street. They weren't standing like a group trying to make a scene. They looked calm, respectful, grateful. Her nephew peeked around her hip. "Are they here for you?" She nodded slowly, her voice soft. "I think so." The biker crouched down a little so he wasn't towering over the boy. "Hey, little man." His voice was gentle, nothing like the loud rumble of his bike. "We're not here to cause trouble. We just wanted to thank your aunt." The boy nodded shyly, hiding behind her again. When she looked back at the lead biker, she asked, "How did you even find my house?" He smiled slightly. We didn't follow you. I promise. I asked the clerk at the gas station if he knew you. He said everyone knew you around here. You help people a lot. He pointed us toward your street. Her cheeks warmed. She wasn't used to her quiet acts being noticed. One of the older bikers stepped forward with a bag of groceries. He held it out with both hands like an offering. Inside were simple things: bread, cereal, milk, fruit. Nothing expensive. Nothing overwhelming. Just useful. We know times can be tough, he said. We didn't want to assume anything, so we brought things anyone could use. Another biker stepped forward with a small envelope. She hesitated, blinking at it. What's this? Just a gift card, he said quickly. Not too much. Just something small to make your week a little easier. Her throat tightened again. She felt overwhelmed in a way she couldn't explain, not scared, not stressed, just touched so deeply she didn't know how to respond. You really didn't have to do this, she whispered. I only paid for your gas, the lead biker nodded. We know, and that's why we're here. Because you didn't do it expecting anything. You did it because you're kind, and people like you. They remind us that the world still has good in it. She looked around. Her yard was filled with powerful motorcycles, rough-looking men with leather jackets, and yet she felt no fear. Just a strange sense of peace, like something was balancing itself out in the world. Some neighbors stepped closer, pretending to take out trash or water plants just to watch. Others peeked from behind blinds, confused and curious. One of the bikers took off his jacket, revealing tattoos all down his arms. He folded the jacket gently, placed it on his bike seat, and approached her with a small box. Made this, he said, offering it to her. She opened it slowly. Inside was a simple wooden key holder with carved patterns. Smooth, polished, beautiful, in a handmade way. She looked up, stunned. You carved this? He nodded. Yeah. Keeps my head clear. Thought maybe your home could use it. Her eyes softened. She looked at every person in front of her, feeling something warm bloom in her chest. She didn't know what to say. The lead biker spoke again, gently. If we're overwhelming you, just say the word. We'll step back. We didn't come to stress you. We just wanted you to know you mattered yesterday. She breathed slowly, touched beyond words. No, you're not overwhelming me. Her voice broke a little. I'm not used to people doing things for me. The biker's expression softened even more. Maybe it's your turn then. She felt her eyes sting and she quickly wiped them. She didn't want to cry in front of all these people, but it was hard not to. Kindness had always been something she gave, not something she received. Her nephew leaned closer. Can they stay for breakfast? She let out a small, surprised laugh. We don't have enough food for all that. One of the bikers chuckled. Don't worry about that. We brought our own. The group laughed lightly, easing the tension. The atmosphere shifted from surprising to warm. Even the neighbors seemed less tense now. The lead biker glanced at her porch. Do you mind if we stick around for a few minutes? Not inside, just out here. We won't bother you, she nodded. Of course. It's okay. With their permission, the bikers relaxed. Some leaned on their bikes. Some talked quietly among themselves. A few handed her nephew small keychains shaped like tiny bikes. He held them like they were treasures. She walked back toward the porch, the biker walking beside her. I really didn't expect any of this, she admitted. I didn't expect your kindness either, he replied. Guess life has its surprises. She smiled softly, the tension in her shoulders disappearing. She felt comfortable in a way she didn't expect. The morning sun rose higher, warming the street. Birds flew overhead, and the quiet neighborhood now looked like a scene from a movie. But this was real, this moment, these people, this unexpected connection, all formed from a single act of kindness. As she watched the bikers laugh with her nephew and talk among themselves with easy smiles, she felt something shift inside her. Not fear, not worry, something lighter, something hopeful. What she didn't know is that this moment, this morning filled with gratitude, was only the beginning of a deeper connection she never saw coming. Tomorrow would bring something even bigger. The street was still quiet when the woman, finished helping her nephew with his backpack and lunchbox. He stood near the door, tightening the straps while humming the tune he learned in class the day before. She watched him for a moment, gently reminding him to pull his jacket zipper all the way up, since the morning breeze was cooler than usual. He made a small face the kind kids make when they're tired of reminders, but he did it anyway. She smiled and rubbed his shoulder before walking him toward the car as they drove. The radio played soft music that neither of them fully listened to. Her nephew looked out the window, watching the early morning joggers and neighbors taking out trash bins. She kept her eyes on the road, though her mind drifted to the biker from the day before. She wasn't sure why the moment stuck with her. Maybe it was the way he tried so hard to hide his embarrassment, or the gratitude in his eyes when she paid for his gas. It had felt like such a small thing, but the way he reacted made it seem much deeper. When she pulled up in front of the school, her nephew leaned over the center console the way he always did for a quick hug. She kissed the top of his head and told him to have a good day. He hopped out, waved twice, and ran toward his teacher's assistant waiting near the entrance. She waited until he disappeared through the doors before driving off. Her job wasn't far from the school, just a small local business where she handled basic office tasks and helped customers. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and let her take care of her nephew after his mother passed away. These days, every decision she made was with him in mind. When she pulled into the parking lot, she noticed her coworker standing outside with a cup of coffee. He waved and she waved back, though she felt a strange heaviness in her chest. She couldn't explain. She tried to shake it off as she walked inside. The morning passed slowly. She answered calls, printed forms, restocked a few shelves in the front, and helped an older couple who needed assistance filling out paperwork. Everything felt normal, but something in her body kept buzzing quietly, like her instincts were trying to warn her of something she couldn't see. Around noon, she stepped outside to get some air. The sun had fully risen now, warm against her skin, and she closed her eyes for a moment, letting the light wash over her. That's when she heard it faint at first, then louder. The rumbling, the deep, steady thunder of motorcycle engines. She opened her eyes slowly, unsure if she was imagining it. The rumbling grew louder, rolling through the street like distant thunder moving closer. She stepped forward, watching cars slow down as people turned their heads toward the noise. Then she saw them. A long line of motorcycles turning onto the main road, moving in slow, controlled formation. More than she could count at first glance. They weren't speeding or showing off. They rode with purpose, all wearing similar jackets with patches sewn onto the back. Her heart jumped. For a second, she wondered if something bad had happened. It wasn't every day you saw this many bikers riding together through a quiet part of town, as the first few bikers passed the store. She noticed one of them turn his head slightly. She recognized him immediately, the man from the gas station. His helmet visor was up now, revealing the face she remembered, serious, yet kind. Strong but carrying quiet tiredness beneath his eyes. He didn't stop, but he slowed a little when he saw her, almost as if making sure she noticed him. Then he lifted one hand and gave a small, respectful nod before rejoining the formation. The entire line kept rolling, and she counted at least 20 bikes, maybe more. People on the sidewalk stared, some taking out their phones, others whispering. But the bikers didn't pay attention to any of them. They moved with a kind of discipline that surprised her. When the last bike disappeared around the corner, she stood frozen for several long seconds. Her coworkers stepped out of the building behind her and asked what was going on. "I'm not sure," she said softly. But deep down, something told her the bikers weren't just passing through the area. They were looking for her. The rest of the day dragged on. Every time she tried focusing on her tasks, her mind drifted back to the biker line. Why had they come through this part of town? Was it connected to her? Did the man she helped tell them something? And if he did, what would dozens of bikers want with her? When her shift ended, she drove toward home with more caution than she realized. Her hands remained tight around the steering wheel, and she kept checking the mirrors, even when there was no reason to. Her neighborhood was usually calm by late afternoon. Kids played outside, someone watered their garden, and music from a nearby home drifted faintly through the air. But when she turned onto her street, something felt different. Her foot pressed lightly on the brake as she slowed down. There, in front of her home, were the motorcycles. Not one or two. Not even 5 or 10. Dozens. They lined the street neatly on both sides, engines off. Standing silently like an unexpected army that had arrived without warning, neighbors peeked through curtains. Some standing on porches pretending to sweep or check mail. A couple across the street whispered to each other while pretending they weren't staring. People didn't know what to make of it. And honestly, neither did she. She pulled into her driveway slowly, heart pounding, wondering if she was supposed to run, shout, or just act normal. Her nephew wasn't home yet, thankfully. His after-school program kept him busy until later as she stepped out of the car. She spotted the biker from the gas station standing near her front steps. He removed his helmet and held it under his arm. Without the gear covering him, he looked different. Still tough, but more human. Calmer, almost gentle. He didn't move closer right away. He let her approach at her own pace. She swallowed hard before speaking. "Is everything okay?" He nodded once. "Yes, ma'am. Everything's good. Didn't mean to scare you. We just came to return a kindness." She blinked, unsure if she heard him right. Return a kindness? He stepped forward then, slowly, respectful of her space. "What you did yesterday, paying for my gas. You didn't have to do that. Most people don't even look at us, let alone help us." "It was just gas," she murmured. "Anyone would have done it." Shook his head. "No, not anyone. But you did. And I told the guys about it. They decided they wanted to thank you properly." She glanced around at all the bikers. Many stood quietly beside their motorcycles, some talking in low voices, some holding small items, others with hands behind their backs, as if waiting for instructions. It wasn't chaotic. It wasn't loud. It was organized and calm, almost respectful. "What does properly mean?" she asked, wary. He gave a small smile. "Nothing bad. We're not here to cause trouble. We just wanted to check up on you, make sure you're safe, and give you something in return." "Give me what?" Before he answered, another biker stepped forward, holding a large paper bag. He offered it gently, almost shyly. She hesitated before taking it. Inside were groceries, fresh produce, bread, snacks, even a pack of her nephew's favorite cereal. She looked up at them, confused. "Why?" The biker from the gas station shrugged lightly. "Because we can. And because good turns shouldn't go unanswered." She felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. It wasn't the groceries they helped. Sure, but it was the thought behind it. And the fact that these men, whom most people avoided, had gone out of their way to show appreciation. "There's more," he added quietly. Her heart fluttered for a second. "More," he nodded. "But we don't want to overwhelm you. If you'd rather we leave, we can go." She looked around again. The bikers remained still, waiting for her reaction. There was no aggression, no pressure. If anything, they looked like they didn't want to frighten her. She took a deep breath. "No, it's okay. You can stay." A few of the bikers smiled. Some relaxed their posture. The man in front of her softened his expression as if relieved. "We won't be long," he said. "I just wanted to show you that someone noticed what you did, and that it mattered." She didn't know what to say. No one had ever done something like this for her. She felt exposed, seen in a way she rarely was. Her life was usually filled with doing things for others, her nephew, her coworkers, neighbors, anyone who needed help. But few people ever stopped to check on her. Yet here she was, surrounded by people she'd met only through one small moment at a gas station. After a long pause, she nodded once. "Thank you, really." The biker bowed his head slightly in acknowledgement. "You're welcome." He turned to the group, giving a small signal with 2 fingers. Within seconds, the bikers began moving, not in a rush, carefully approaching her with small items, bags, and boxes. Some carried tools. Others had groceries or supplies. One even held a brand new bike helmet small enough for a child. She stared, overwhelmed. "What is all this?" "A few things we thought you might need," the biker said. "We're not trying to make a scene, just trying to help." She bit her lip, emotions swelling. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "Just know we don't forget kindness. Ever." His neighbors continued watching from behind curtains and half-closed doors. The woman stood at her driveway, surrounded by strangers who suddenly didn't feel like strangers at all, and deep down, she knew something important. This was only the beginning. The sun was slowly dropping behind the rooftops when the last of the bikers finished placing the bags and boxes neatly beside her porch. The cool evening breeze carried the soft sounds of their engines cooling down, metal ticking faintly in the background. The woman stood near the front steps, still trying to take everything in, while the biker from the gas station remained close by. Giving her space but also keeping an eye on how she was feeling, she thanked each biker, quietly as they stepped forward with a gift. Some brought canned food, others brought fresh fruit, and some even brought basic tools she could use around the house. There were blankets, snacks for her nephew, school supplies, and even a small box filled with household items like light bulbs, batteries, and cleaning wipes. Simple things, yet things that added up in real life. She didn't know how long she stood there repeating thank you. But it felt like time moved differently in that moment. Every biker approached her with the same respect, no loud voices, no jokes, no showing off. Just sincere gratitude. She felt her chest tighten every time someone placed something in her hands. With a quiet nod, her neighbor from across the street stepped out and pretended to check his mailbox. Though he kept glancing at the crowd of bikers, another neighbor stood frozen on her porch with a broom in her hand, not even pretending to sweep anymore. Word had clearly spread through the street, and people didn't know what to make of the unexpected gathering. She wanted to explain to them, but she didn't even have the full explanation herself. She only knew one thing. None of this felt threatening. If anything, she felt strangely protected as the sun dipped deeper. The biker from the gas station finally stepped closer to her again. He looked at the growing pile on her porch and then back at her. "Hope it's not too much," he said quietly. She shook her head. "It's a lot, but in a good way. I just didn't expect any of this." He scratched his jaw as if unsure how to respond. "We don't usually do stuff like this, but the guys agreed it was worth it. You helped one of us without hesitation, and that means something." She let out a soft laugh, not because anything was funny, but because her emotions were tangled in too many directions. "I didn't think I did anything special." "You did," he said, almost before she finished her sentence. "You saw someone who needed help. You didn't judge. You just acted. People don't do that much anymore." A few of the bikers listened from a short distance, nodding in agreement. Just then, a small school van turned onto the street. Her nephew was inside, talking to one of the staff members, unaware of what he was about to see. The biker shifted slightly, not threateningly, just making room so he could get through. The van slowed in front of the house. When the door slid open, her nephew hopped out with his backpack bouncing behind him. He looked up and froze. His eyes widened at the sight of all the motorcycles and the tough-looking men standing around. For a moment, he pressed himself against her leg, unsure if he should be scared or curious. She knelt down beside him. "It's okay," she whispered gently. "They're friends." One of the bikers closest to him gave a small wave. Her nephew blinked and waved back shyly. The biker smiled beneath his beard, nodding once. "Hey, little man," another biker said softly. "We brought something for you too." It's from behind his motorcycle. He pulled out the small helmet the woman had seen earlier. It was shiny, clean, and just the right size for a child. Her nephew's eyes lit up. "For me?" he whispered. "For you," the biker said. "Safety first, right?" Her nephew looked up at his aunt, asking permission without words. She smiled at him and nodded. Carefully, the biker knelt down and adjusted the helmet on the boy's head. Her nephew giggled as he tapped the sides of it, feeling how snug it was. The woman's eyes grew warm as she watched the interaction. She knew her nephew saw kindness before he saw fear. That part of him was something she worked hard to protect. After a few minutes, Her nephew ran inside to put his backpack away and check the pile of things the bikers brought. Meanwhile, the biker from the gas station walked up to the porch and leaned slightly on the railing. "We didn't mean to overwhelm you," he said. "We just wanted to do something good today. Something that matched what you gave." She turned to him. "But I only paid for gas." "It wasn't the gas," he replied. "It was the way you treated me. I'm not used to it." She nodded slowly, understanding more with each word. "I didn't do it for anything in return." "I know," he said. "That's why it mattered." For a moment, silence settled around them. Not awkward, just peaceful. The kind of silence that comes when two people finally understand each other without needing more words. Soon after, one of the bikers walked up to the man beside her and leaned in to speak quietly. The man nodded and turned back to her. "We should get going," he said. "Don't want to block your street too long." She glanced at all the bikes and realized how unusual the scene looked. "Yeah, people are definitely curious," he smirked lightly. "We're kind of used to that." One by one, the bikers put on their helmets and prepared to leave. The engines roared to life, but not aggressively, just enough to warm up. The ground vibrated slightly beneath her feet as each bike rolled into formation. Before leaving, the man turned back to her. "If you ever need anything at all, call that number." He pulled a small card from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. The card was plain, no logo, no fancy text. Just a number written neatly in black ink. She accepted it and looked up at him. "Thank you." "No," he said, shaking his head. "Thank you." With that, he put on his helmet and joined the line. The bikers began riding off slowly, turning the corner in a smooth formation until the last one disappeared from view. The street became quiet again. It's almost too quiet after the thunder of engines. Her neighbors peeked out one last time before retreating inside their homes. The world around her seemed to return to normal. She didn't feel the same. She gathered the bags from the porch and set them just inside the doorway. Her nephew ran to the window, watching the last bit of the group disappear far down the street. "Auntie," he whispered, "are they coming back?" She looked at the card in her hand, the simple number that felt heavier than it looked. "Maybe one day," she said. "But even if they don't, today was enough." Her nephew turned and hugged her waist. "They were cool," he said with a grin. She laughed, smoothing his hair. "Yeah, they really were." That night, after dinner and homework and getting her nephew ready for bed, she finally sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and took a deep breath. The house was quiet again. But something inside her felt lighter, stronger. She thought back to the moment at the gas station. The tired look on the man's face, the hesitation in his voice, the way he seemed surprised that someone cared enough to help. She thought of how that one simple act had led to everything that happened today. It made her realize something important. Kindness had a way of growing roots in places she didn't expect, sometimes in the hearts of strangers, sometimes in people society judged too quickly, sometimes in places where kindness wasn't supposed to exist at all. She knew tomorrow she would go back to her regular life work, errands, responsibilities. But she also knew she would never forget the moment dozens of bikers stood in front of her home, not to scare her, not to take from her, but to return a simple act of humanity. Before going to bed, she picked up the card one more time. She stared at the number, thinking about the man with the tired eyes and the group of riders who treated her with respect. She didn't know if she would ever call the number. Maybe she would one day. Maybe she wouldn't. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't completely alone in the world. She turned off the kitchen light and walked toward her bedroom, letting the quiet house wrap around her. The night felt calm, steady, and full of possibility, and in her heart, she carried a truth she would remember for the rest of her life. Sometimes one small act of kindness can echo far louder than any engine on the road.